Hello everybody, welcome to this tutorial. In this tutorial, we'll be discussing control statements in R. We're going to cover five different statements: if, else, for loop, while loop, next, and break. Let's start with the if, else statement. If, else statement makes it possible to choose between two expressions depending on the value of a logical condition. The basic form that we are talking about is like this. So the condition, if it's evaluated to be true, then expression 1 is evaluated. Otherwise, the expression 2 is evaluated. For example, of course x is not defined. Let's say x is 10 and I execute this if-else statement. X is evaluated to be greater than 0, so y equals square root of x is evaluated instead of the second portion. As we can see from this variable, watch that square root of 10 is being assigned to the variable y. We don't always have to have the else portion, so these two statements are equivalent. Also, for the Boolean expression, we can use the operator logic and logic or. For that purpose, let's look at this truth table. Basically, if we construct a Boolean expression by connecting two Boolean expressions with the logic and operator, then this expression is going to be evaluated to be true if and only if both the left and right side are true, or if this expression is constructed by connecting with a or expression or operator, then the expression itself is going to be evaluated to be false if and only if both A and B are false. Let's look at it in example. Let's say if I have if x is greater than 0 and x is less than 10, if that condition holds, then I'm going to compute y to be the square root of x, otherwise y is going to be 0. And my x is 10, so the second half of the Boolean expression does not hold. Therefore, we're going to get false for the entire expression. So the second half, the expression 2, is being evaluated. So that is the if-else statement. Now let's look at loops. We'll be first discussing the for loop. As part of a computing task, we often want to repeat something and do it multiple times. So in R, we can use the for loop. The basic format is in this way. For example, we can use the data set that we used for one of our previous tutorials. Let's say we have a data set in this way, that is a list of people with 9 different attributes. I read it in from a comma-separated valuable file, and all of these data are described here. Basically, I have 9 different columns. So we are going to use this data set for our example to describe the for loop. Let's take a look at this block of code. First, I assign s to the initial value of 0, and then I'm going to loop over the dataset, the vector age, and for each value in this vector age, I'm going to add it to s, and at the very end, I divide the value s and by the total number of values in the vector of age. So basically, I'm computing the average, and then as we can see, this is the same as the mean function is providing us. So that's what for loop is. We are looping over every single element in this vector, and then we're doing something to it. We can also loop by indices. So for the same example, we can do something like for I in 1 to the length of the vector, and then we do something to it. Here we did the same thing. And keep in mind, in R, vectors are 1 bounded, so the indices starts from 1. Start from 1. And that's what I have to say about for loop. We also have while loop. Usually the for loops evaluate an expression in a fixed number of times, and sometimes it's also useful to repeat a calculation until a particular condition fails. So while loop is designed for this purpose in this form of control flow, and the basic look is like so. While a certain condition holds, we evaluate a certain expression or a set of expressions. Let's use a very similar example as what we did up there. First, I initialize s to be 0, and then I initialize I to be 1, which is my looping index here. So I say, while this is less than 1,000, and then I'm going to accumulate the age to this s, and then I'm going to move my index to the next position of this age vector. And then as I can see, the loop stopped while this s is exceeding 1,000, which fails this Boolean expression up there. So that's the while loop. And now let's discuss the next statement and the break statement. First, the next statement. Sometimes given a condition, it's useful to be able to skip to the end of a loop and then move on to the next iteration. And this can be done with the next statement. So it's, if we look at the common form, it would be something like that. So what we're talking about here is for this variable in this vector, we're going to normally evaluate expression 1 and expression 2. But if the condition holds for this line, then we're going to skip expression 2 and then move on to the next iteration and then evaluate the next iteration's expression 1 and do the same thing. Let's take a look at an example again. Let's say, let me clear up the console. Let's say for some reason we are not going to consider the individuals with a weight that's greater than 100. So I loop over the vector for age, and whenever I encounter an individual has a weight greater than 100, then I'm going to move on to the next iteration. That'll end up accumulating the age for individuals with weight that's less than or equal to 100, pretty much. And we will take a look at what the average is, and this should be different from the previous average that we've seen from here because we've excluded some of the people off of this list. So that's the next statement, which is same as the continue statement in many of the other languages. We will also look at the break statement. So the break statement provides a way to exit from a control loop, any type of control loop. Sometimes that would be very useful. For example, let's look at this block of code. Let's say if we're trying to determine if there is a person that's older than 50 in my data set. So the first person that I found that's greater than 50 in age, then I would know that the condition is true, so I can terminate at that point. But if not, I have to carry on this search all the way to the end of my vector. So I'm going to loop this each vector, and for each one of them I'm going to compare the value with 50, and if it's evaluated to be greater than 50, I'm going to say, okay, I found my answer, and then I'm going to break. So in this data set, I can see that I do have individuals that are greater than 50 in age, so that the variable is initialized to be false and switched to true when this condition is met. And then I don't have to carry out the rest of the loop. So that's the break statement, which is another useful tool to have for control flow. And that's all I have to say about control statement in R. We've covered if, else, for loop, while loop, the next statement, and the break statement.